pointing out that this event is made possible in part by a grant from the Lake Region Arts Council. I also have a grant from the Minnesota State Arts Board to turn this entire project into a book, which will be coming out this fall. And then I'm also doing this as part of a video series here in town called Creative Moorhead. So this, the audio recording of this will be shared later. I am recording now, which is audio and video, but I'm only going to keep the audio portion just because the video ends up being so huge. And the audio portion then will also be posted to the Dish Project website, which is www.dishproject.com. And I'm going to be taking some notes, and hopefully some excerpts will be added to the book from our conversation tonight. But also, we're going to focus quite a bit on comfort food tonight. So if you have any comfort food recipes that you want to include in the book, please feel free to email them to me, and I'll put my email in the chat area on the side of your screen. And yeah, we'll see what happens. I did make some comfort food. This is mine. I don't know if you can see it. That is cucumbers and cream over mashed potatoes. So.
Oh my goodness, yes.
So we will just get started. If you wouldn't mind going around, just saying your first name. This entire project has been focused on Minnesota traditions and heritage, and sort of the relationships that we have in our communities throughout Minnesota. But because this is an online event, we're going to expand that a bit. So if you're from Minnesota, great. If you're not, great. If you moved away, if you just moved here, whatever, it doesn't matter. We're not going to focus too much on Minnesota. We're going to shift and focus a little bit more on food and relationships. So I'm going to start, and I think if you, there's a couple different storytelling techniques we can use. One of them is called a circle share, where we would normally go around a circle and take turns, so nobody has to worry about jumping in or how long they're taking. There's no interrupting. But because all of our circles here are slightly different, if you want to go next, if you want to share, just, I don't know, it's kind of awkward, but maybe just put up a finger or make some gesture, and then we can collectively just give that person space to share their story. I don't want it to be like school where you're going, teacher, me next. Lots of ladies in the house tonight. Anyway, so I'll go first. Basically the question is what is your preferred comfort food today, right now? And mine is, I showed you, mine is cream and cucumbers over mashed potatoes. It's, I say cream, but it's actually mayonnaise with vinegar and sugar. So it's almost like coleslaw with cucumbers over yellow buttery mashed potatoes. And it sounds so weird to people, but it is so good. My grandma made cucumbers and my grandma made mashed potatoes, and I don't know if she put them on top, if that's where it started, but the potatoes my grandma made, there's a story there. My grandpa's uncle was a soldier during World War II. And he was going through a field, and he would pick up potatoes in Germany in the field and stick them in his pocket, and then they would cook them up and eat them. And he found this particular potato that was super soft and buttery, and he liked it so much he kept it in his pocket. So when he came home to the States, he started planting that potato, and that potato has been in our family for, 60, 70 years now. So that's not the potato I have here. This is a Costco potato, but that's my comfort food. So if anybody
Can you imagine that happening today, Sue? Oh my gosh, that had never happened today.
Yeah.
No, you'd have to abandon it at TSA.
At the border. Yeah, TSA.
Yep.
And get fined for bringing it.
Yeah, it's a delicious potato. So who else has a comfort food? What's your go-to comfort food?
Hmm.
Heidi, I
don't know
know
what
you have one because you told me about it before.
Yeah, I'll tell you. I'll start. So I'm Heidi. I'm in St. Joe, Minnesota. But my family is here in Minnesota from Chicago. My dad's actually from North Minneapolis. My mom's from North Chicago. So comes from my matrilineal line. So that's from my mom. But she has a chili recipe that is it's my go-to comfort food. It was one of those foods where this is sort of serious, but when I went through my divorce, my therapist and the person who was like guiding us through this as parents, they said, cook food that your kids will find comfort in, because when they come to your house, they're going to want to see something that's normal, and your food is going to be most likely to be that. So the chili was the thing that I thought would be one of the top 5 things to make. And the funny thing is about the chili, and there's a pivot in that part of the story, but the weird thing about the recipe is that my mom put peanut butter in it, like just a tablespoon. It wasn't, I mean, for a huge crock of it was like, you didn't taste it, but she said it was a thickener because when she got the recipe in Chicago, I think it was, or River Forest, which is outside of Chicago, she got the recipe, but then that ingredient, she can't remember what it is. But she goes, I think it was a thickener, but there was a Mexican version of a thickener. Okay, so I've been wanting to find out what it was, and nothing. And she might say maybe it was moly or something like that, and then it's just like, and Mom, just we don't really know. So I still put peanut butter in my chili. However, one of my kids went to my friend's house, and she was equally going through something similar as I was. Her kids were similar in age, and she was going through a breakup with their father, and so she was making chili, and my kids loved it more so than they loved mine. And this is not, I mean, I don't take offense much, but I was like, well, what did you put in this? And she goes, cinnamon. So now I put peanut butter and cinnamon into my chili, and like, seriously, we could live off of it. I mean, it is the most complete meal ever. And then add cornmeal or cornbread to it, and then you're just set for days. So yeah, and then I have a million recipes of when you get sick of overdoing the chili recipe, what to do with the chili. That's a whole other footnote in the cookbook that doesn't exist for me. So yeah, that's my comfort food story.
That's
Can
really
I
cool.
pass it
Your
off to somebody
therapist
else?
is really smart.
Yeah, who wants to go?
Let's see. Mary's got one.
Okay.
But Mary has one.
Only for people who can pronounce this correctly.
I was muting, but I said it perfectly.
I'm sure you did, yeah. This past Sunday was 17. Mai, which is Norwegian Independence Day. And then this is the table prayer that our grandmother always made us say. But do you think I can remember it, And when I listen to it online, I'm like, well, my grandma didn't say it that way, And then just this past year, I found out at another meeting I went to that it actually can be done to our traditional, I'm lapsed Lutheran, Minnesota Lutheran. Be present at our table, Lord. You can do that to this. Okay, you don't want to hear me sing. I'm the one that's in Overland Park, Kansas now, but Minnesota born and raised. And I was so tickled when I was invited to this because I love hot dish. And I find my husband was born and raised in the Kansas City area. And man, just regionally, things so different. And I know I grew up in a strange little flat, boring prairie of Minnesota, you know, not lake country, not Lake Wobegon, not, you know, the Twin Cities. I was out in boring flatlands. But down here, so comfort food is things that I know, and sometimes I get kind of snarky about it down here. They don't know about bars down here. Bars, do you know what I mean? If someone told you to bring a pan of bars, we know you bring a pan of bars. They have no idea
And there's
what
a
it
million.
is. And
So many bars.
Oh yeah, because in my family cookbook, yeah, I'm sitting here with cookbook. In my family cookbook, there's a whole chapter on just bars. And they're like, no, you have Rice Krispie treats, you have brownies, and you might have lemon squares. And I said, yeah, those are all bars. No, you describe something and they call them pan cookies. Pan cookies?
That's for lazy people.
Well, and I once
It's all
got that
bars.
from someone. I once got that from someone out east too. They referred to, yeah, we were having a debate at some, you know, hotel after a conference, you know, those hotel rooms, and I debate food. Pan cookies, and there's bars, and hot dish, not casserole, the usual thing. Comfort food. I love beef commercials, the hot beef sandwiches, and the beef commercials at the 4-H food stand at my county fair were the best, you know, in fall. And it's the mashed potatoes. All good things start with mashed potatoes and some good beef brisket or whatever. And then that brown gravy and just some bread, and even just Wonder Bread, you know, if you can't have homemade bread. When I first came down here, I got involved with the KC Fringe Festival. I never got involved in the Minnesota Fringe Festival. It intimidated me too much. That's hardcore fringe. I felt very comfortable down here, and they're a wonderful family. And so I was recommended because the KC Star had a Sunday, I promise this won't be too long. The KC Star had a Sunday food feature. And when it was Fringe Week, they wanted to feature a fringe artist. So the executive director had kind of gotten to know me and how kooky and weird I am, and said, oh, Mary, submit a recipe. And I did. And my recipe was rejected.
Oh.
It is Dairy Delight. And June is Dairy Month coming up. It's a recipe that I made for 4-H demonstrations, and it's easy and it's comfort food. And stick with me. You know how you have to stick with me on any Norwegian Lutheran fluff salad. I love that we call them salads. You need a carton of cottage cheese. Cottage cheese was special occasion food for us, even though I grew up on a dairy farm. The idea that you would buy cottage cheese, that's wasteful. We got cottage cheese for like Easter, for special occasions. So you need cottage cheese. You need a package of orange Jell-O. Stick with me. You need mandarin oranges, those little, and save a few to decorate the top, and whipped cream. Now, if you want to get fancy, you could add little marshmallows. Dairy Delight was rejected by the KC Star. It was just too, you know, didn't sound, I don't know, it was too, commercialized. I don't know, a little too prepared, a little too, you know, sweet and unhealthy. But because I did the whole shtick about this is a Minnesota thing, I made the mistake of mentioning lutefisk and lefse. And the food editor came back to me and said, now tell me about lefse. Let's do an article on lefse. I hate lefse. I mean, I hated lefse growing up. I never made it. I refused to participate in it. But I lied to her and said I made lefse for the first time at, 55 years old. And here's the thing with lefse. Don't sweeten it up, savor it up. I like it rolled like in a tortilla. I like it with gravy. I like it with hot sauce. I like it with cheese. I do not like it sweet. I don't do it sweet because it's potato. So comfort food. I guess my comfort food is.
It's really good with fish and coleslaw.
Yes. Oh, yes, like fish taco. Oh, that so makes sense. Yeah. But don't sweeten it up. I don't like it sweet.
Sons of Norway in Fargo they have a day for lunch hot beef lefse.
Yes. Oh.
So
In my
they
part
roll
of
the beef
Minnesota,
into
they
the
didn't,
lefse,
it was always sweet,
the
you know.
potatoes in the gravy.
Oh,
my
that
father,
sounds idea.
my father-in-law always had leftover meat in his lefse.
Yeah.
And he just roll up the turkey and whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds
Terry,
amazing.
do you have a favorite comfort food?
Well, is it supposed to be hot dish related?
It can be anything.
My first comfort food item, in response to you, Mary, our version of your salad was lime jello and pineapple, crushed pineapple, and the cottage cheese and Cool Whip. And then sometimes you'd put in the miniature marshmallows that are colored just for the kids to have it a little more. But that was always like a family salad that was a big hit for everybody. They loved it. But when I first thought of comfort food was, I grew up with Sunday dinner being roast beef, potatoes, and carrots, all cooked together in the roaster. We got home from church, then everybody ate that meal. When in 1997, I lived in Grand Forks, and when we got evacuated, we went to Steve's mom's in Ulan, and there was about 12 of us that came as we were evacuated, and she made a roast beef dinner with the potatoes and the carrots. And when we smelled it coming into the kitchen, it was like comfort food. Everybody was saying, this is just what we needed. This is comfort food. So that just always just settles me down. The other interesting Norwegian related story was when my daughter had been away and she came home after being away to college and living other places, and she sat down at Christmas and she saw the torsk and the white potatoes and the melted butter and the lefse and everything white. She just said, this looks and smells like Christmas. And she was just thrilled to have everything white. But if you're thinking of a hot dish kind of thing, when I went to nursing school, my mom, I didn't grow up cooking, I baked. And my mom taught me how to make chipped beef gravy on toast. So my roommates, we each had one meal that we cooked, and my meal was chipped beef gravy on toast. So, I don't know if any of the others of you grew up with that.
Oh, totally. Totally. My mom did chipped beef. I actually do have a story to that, but I have to add, we got to pin that to the end because it's really hilarious. But yeah, that was a comfort food for us too. I think it was kind of, and my mom used the chipped beef in the bag, that was like super cheap. You could get it for like 25 cents a bag. And so, and I know that was like kind of our, poverty meal of choice.
Yep.
And but I still love it.
Yep. And then just grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup. So homemade tomato soup, but even Campbell's tomato soup was just a delight.
Desiree, were you working on a comfort food item earlier today?
Yeah, and I was trying, skip me for now, because I've been, since the Corona-cation, we've been cooking a lot. So I was trying to find I'm going to find other pictures, like this, skip me for now.
Okay. How about Laura? Do you have a comfort food?
Hi. I think my comfort food is like chocolate and cookies and sweets. Honestly, like if I need some comfort, I go to the sweets. So I love cookies. And we just found some new recipes over this time. We got some new cookbooks and tried some new recipes that I really, really like. And I sent Sue one of the cookie recipes. It has peanut butter chips in it, and it's like got chocolate chips and walnuts and all this good stuff. It's just like a kitchen sink cookie, almost like a monster cookie almost, but it's not. But it's so good. So I bake those a lot during this Corona time. So, and I freeze them too. So I just go to the freezer and grab out 5 of them and stick them in the oven when we decide that we need some. But that's about it.
I think cookies are they're a common comfort food. How
Yeah.
about Megan?
Hi. I don't know really. I don't cook that much, although I have been cooking more.
You
So
don't
I'd
have to make it yourself if it brings you comfort and you can eat it.
when you said comfort food, I think grilled cheese and tomato soup, that's true, and chocolate, and as Laura was saying. But the first thing that came to mind was actually an Irish fry, they call it. We grew up kind of having that, but then also when we lived in Ireland, we would have that. So it is, obviously, it's a breakfast fry up. You have the next morning after maybe some Guinness drinking the night before. But it's like, even just thinking about it, it makes my mouth water. So it's black pudding, white pudding, which, come from they're blood puddings. And then eggs and potato bread and soda bread and tomatoes and mushrooms. So I guess that's really it. I don't know.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Super good. And it helps with that hangover quite a bit too.
Yes. Irish food is really good for that, isn't it?
Oh,
I forgot that trick.
It has to be.
I want to know more about the blood pudding. My grandma of German on my dad's side, I have vivid memories of her making blood soup. She came out when we butchered geese.
Yeah.
And she'd keep the blood and make blood soup. I never tried it as a child. Now I wish I would have.
Yeah, blood sausage. I always had to make my husband blood sausage.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
the same. Yeah, it's basically the same. It's black pudding is a kind of sausage made from pork blood. So I just quickly Googled that. But honestly, it's not very tasty. But anyway.
It's really salty.
It's always there on the plate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm always like once
blood.
every few years I'll do a blood sausage or something like that, depending on the provider of the sausage.
Right.
And I've been tempted. I have a meat market a block away, and I'm really tempted to just try it.
Yeah. I mean, might be good that next morning. I don't know. But it's also the potato bread and the soda bread. It's just unbelievable, And I think in general, bread and meat and cheese and chocolate are just so much better in Ireland. They're just out of this world. So, and sausages. You also get sausages, which are not like sausages here, but they're kind of like links, big links of sausages. So that's it.
In general, how much, when you guys prepare food, or if you were preparing something special, or like Terry mentioned the holidays and Christmas, how much of those foods that you prepare for special events or for traditional events tie into your cultural identity? Because in our family, we have traditions that my mom makes caramel corn every year. My mom identifies primarily as being Polish. So there's not necessarily a link, as far as I know, between caramel corn and the Polish culture. But I'm just wondering, for you guys, how much does food tie into your cultural identity?
Both my husband and I we're both Norwegian in background. And so we grew up with different foods, but a lot of them were the similar. And so especially the holidays, we do, like at Christmas time, I make the rosettes and the krumkake and the lefse, and we have rumagret and some of those. He grew up eating ribs on Christmas Eve. I grew up doing lutefisk and Swedish meatballs. And so now we do torsk and meatballs on Christmas Day, and we do the ribs on Christmas Eve and have the lefse both times. But a lot of that is very much the Norwegian tradition for us. It always has been. Yeah. And then other holidays, it's kind of what we both grew up with our parents kind of gave us traditions for. So.
I think one thing that I kind of learned when my grandmother died was more of my cultural heritage around food. I think my parents basically, because they were both raised in urban communities, they had sort of a diverse pool of foods that they were exposed to at that point. And I should say it changes over time, right? But one of the things that I remember when Grandma died, we went back to the old neighborhood, and it was definitely still Polish. And that's so prior to that, so that was when I was in college. So in high school, I learned German because I am technically mostly German. But we went back to the funeral. We started, like, my cousin and I were wandering around, going to grab food and all this stuff. And we kept looking at the food, and I'm like, now this seems like it's right. Like, it was pierogies and sausages and kraut, and there's a lot of commonality between German and Polish, but things like the pierogi was something that I really, I knew I had them when I was younger, but I also, but there was something about, maybe it's the level of butter. Come to think of it, that's the thing that I was really like, that's something that definitely got passed down while they were, moving on to other types of cuisine. So I think that that was the first time that my cultural heritage really spoke up and said, this is home. But then since then, I've been conscious of the difference between Polish and German food. Polish is better. And then I also was very, then I also, when I would go into neighborhoods where the food was closer to the authentic version of those foods, I really got excited and interested in what made them authentic. So, I think I'm just in a somewhat pluralistic society where, we've shared a lot of these recipes, but we never had stuff passed down necessarily, except for fun little tricks or little details. But yeah. And I think because of that too, with the exception, like Thanksgiving, whatever, it's turkey, whatever, mom does whatever she does, but we're very experimental in our family. So we all of a sudden will say, well, let's just do prime rib, or we'll switch over. So we never have traditional foods that we really must have at the holiday season.
Mary, did you want to say something?
Sorry, I'm using my phone, and I have friends that are, okay, just wait. Let me get back to you. I have friends that are apparently they're all drinking, college friends, and they're texting. And then I have a nephew in prison in Arizona that calls me like 6 times a day. But anyway, that's okay. He knows I catch him. When you were talking about, I have the Norwegian and the German upbringing. And I guess as I got older, and then I taught college for quite a few years, I started finding out, what was tradition or culture, or what was just kind of my weird family. And also, Heidi, you said more urban, and I would say rural, and poor economics. But though we didn't see ourselves as poor, I really thought a lot of, when you talked about hot dishes and other things, I really thought everything required a whole bunch of oatmeal. My mother was adding oatmeal. I'm from a family of 8. My mother added oatmeal to everything. You get to college and you start, cooking with friends or roommates, and I'm like, what the hell you adding oatmeal to that for? And I'm like, isn't that part of the, And rumagrat, I didn't know what rumagrat was till I was teaching college. I knew it as milk mush. Sunday nights, because we had the big Sunday, and again, it's breakfast, dinner, supper. So you had your big dinner midday. That's that farm upbringing. But Sunday supper might be just a big pot of rice. I'm talking white rice, and maybe you added butter and cinnamon to it, or it was this milk mush that my mother grew up with. It wasn't until I had a student do a speech, because I always would have students do food, if, you know, informative speeches on food. I guess I was always hungry. That I heard rumagrat, I had never heard that used. Or the cranberry salad that my mother would make in a punch bowl at Christmas time is actually called giftis. I'd never heard that name, and it involves cranberry, whipped cream, and soda crackers. And that's just cheap. It, you know, all that is cheap food. Or when I shared with, I told my grandma a story about making blood soup, but I also remember she saved everything from that goose, you know, all the internal organs and the feet and the legs. And I was sharing that in class, and I had, when I taught in Rochester, I had a Hmong student go, well, my grandma, oh man, chicken feet. And, you know, she's listing off different poultry and the feet, and she's like, and I'm like, that's what my German grandma would. You didn't waste anything, you know, you ate everything. I'm not quite that brave. So I don't know, I don't know what is my culture or what is my part of Minnesota, and I've always heard, and I have a dear friend that's lived in Decorah, Iowa forever. The Norwegians that came here, yeah, we are more weird and more Nordic than what they're still doing over there in Norway. We brought it with us.
Okay, I got my pictures done, and that's such an interesting question, because in terms of like how is your food, your culture, and your identity? Because okay, so I know all of you can see me, so I look this way, but I was adopted by Finnish and Norwegian people, and I grew up in the Lakes area. And Sue and I know each other because our husbands went to school together, and they're nerdy chemists together. And I'm like a typical Minnesota introvert, and so my husband was like, "Oh, you really got to meet Chris's girlfriend. You'd really like her." And I was like, "Oh, do we have to go out?" And then when Sue and I met, I was like, "What do you mean you went to school here?" "Well, this is where I went to school, and we had all these things in common."
We went to school 10 miles apart. We grew up 10 miles apart.
And one of the things we found out, like one of the things we still sort of tease our husbands about today, is like, they're like, "How come you never bring us to swim in Big Detroit Lake?" And we're like, "Because it's gross and it's for the tourists." So, but the food thing is so interesting, because there's things I grew up eating that I didn't know were Finnish. And then now that I'm an adult, my kids go to the Concordia language villages in the summer, and I'm getting that staff discount, and I'm cooking in the Korean kitchen there, because by a weird God has a sense of humor. And so now I'm married to a Korean man, and my name matches my face. And so I've learned how to cook Korean food, because my family is big into cooking, and it's like you just sort of grew up in the kitchen. And the one way I could connect with his mom, because I don't speak Korean and she doesn't speak English, was to cook. And so now I can cook like crap tons of Korean food. I don't even know what all of it's called, but I can cook it. And so that's how I'm getting my kids a discount at the language villages up near Bemidji. So anyway, by a weird twist of fate, the head chef at the Korean village is married to a Finnish American woman, and she's very connected to her roots, and she's like on the board for Salalampi at the Finnish village there. And I would talk about food or my family's culture, and he'd be like, "Oh, well, that's," and he'd have a long Finnish, you know, my multi-syllabic word for it. And I'd be like, "Wait, so this is a thing?" And he'd be like, "Yeah, that's a Finnish thing." And I'd be like, "Well, hot dog, I am Finnish after all." And so like comfort food, there's nothing more comforting than flatbread. And my kids are on a kick where it's like, I'll make like 4 loaves at a time, and it's gone in like 2 days. And so this is, oh, that's hard to see because it's in the bag, but no, wrong way. There's my flatbread. And I remember, I have such good memories of like my grandparents making that, and they would make like 8, 10, a dozen loaves at a time, and it'd be bread making day. And I remember the smell of the yeast, and it was poor man's food. Like when I tried to look up recipes for it, they were so fancy, and it's like my grandparents didn't put any, they just put flour in because I think that's all they could afford, but it was so good. And then my dad is big into making these really thin omelets, and what's funny about them to me is that they're not filled with fancy cheese. He puts Velveeta in them, and they're so good. And my kids will even like make me a grandpa omelet, you know. And then my Finnish grandfather used to make these really thin pancakes, and my sons like to put chocolate chips in them now, but like not like fluffy American pancakes, like really nice thin where the edges are kind of crispy. And then, I mean, lefse is so, like, my aunt had like a lefse making tutorial for us one year at Christmas, you know. I don't think that you can see my pictures well. And so I was like, we're stuck in the house. And then Sue was laughing because in my pictures, a lot of times, like, here's my oldest son wearing a Concordia sweatshirt, Concordia t-shirt, because I'm macabre. But that's our left set. And then today I felt like, oh, I should make a hot dish because I'm going to the thing and I'll hold up a bowl of hot dish, but it's gone already. But I made a tater tot hot dish. And everyone, and I laughed at Sue because I texted her the picture. I was like, I'm going to try to come tonight. And look at, here's June helping me fry the hamburger, and his Concordia sweatshirt is like, doesn't get any more Minnesotan than that. We met in college. That's my youngest son putting the tater tots on the top, and that's it in the oven. My mom was like, where did you get that pan? I was like, you bought me that pan. She's like, you're going to feed a whole, she's like, it's not even for the Army, it's for the Marines. It's so big. I was like, I think it's just the perspective I took it at makes it look really weirdly big. But of course, you gotta put some ketchup on it. And so like that's them digging in, but it's like I made a big one on purpose because I didn't want to cook tomorrow, but it's gone. There's nothing left. But then my Korean mother-in-law got me into all kinds of Korean food. So this is called bibimbap, and it's like the equivalent of a hot dish. And you just like whatever vegetables you got left lying around is what goes in it on top of a bowl of rice, and there's a spicy sauce, and you put a fried egg on it because obviously everything's better with a gooey egg on top of it. And then this is my, like, I didn't know that was a Finnish breakfast item, like to put cold cuts on top of a piece of bread with like butter, but apparently it is because the head chef at the Korean village who's married to the Finnish American woman told me so. And we've also been making, this is a Korean comfort food, we've been making homemade dumplings, homemade mandu. I don't think I can get it to, I'm trying to get the light to like be able to show you guys. Anyway, so we like to cook and be in the kitchen because it's like kind of a family affair. So that's part of the cultural identity of it too, I think, is that like to make lefse or bread or something, you need a lot of people to be dealing with it.
Yeah, for all of you, how has your habits or relationship to food changed, or has it changed during the quarantine, the pandemic?
I'm eating too much of it. Oh, and I thought somebody said something about the Minnesota State Fair, and immediately in my head, like in terms of comfort food, like my family makes fun of me because I will not buy anything except, because I live in North Carolina now, so I can't get my hands on Gedney pickles unless I go home. And so I'll buy Target brand pickles because I think since Target's a Minnesota company, like that's the closest pickle I can find to tasting like a Gedney. And so that they're like, let's just get, you know, pickles at the grocery store. I'm like, no, we got to go to Target for the pickles. Like, I'll go to Target just to get pickles. And they're like, what's wrong with you, Mom? And then when we go home, they're always embarrassed because I'll buy jars of Gedney and I'll pack them up in our sweatshirts and stuff. And June's cousin from Korea lives here with his wife from Korea. And she's like, this is the best pickle I've ever had. So now when I go home, I feel like I have to buy her a jar of pickles or two as well. So I like buy a lot of pickles when I go home. And my kids are like, it's embarrassing to go to the grocery store with you and your pickles.
That's funny. I make my own pickles, so I don't think I've purchased pickles in years, you know?
Okay, but my grandma used to make these refrigerator pickles.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I love
What
refrigerator
are,
pickles.
like hers were like really thin sliced, and there were mysterious things that she put in there, and they'd sit in the longer they sat in the back of the fridge, the better they got.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
My
but were they
grandmother made
sweet?
watermelon pickles.
They were a little sweet, but not.
Yeah.
I don't usually like. I don't like a sweet gherkin or something like that, but there was
Yeah.
something different about her refrigerator pickles.
Mm-hmm. I did refrigerator pickles. I started doing them a few years ago. Actually, Mary, you would know Ron from Zoom Skis and the Black and White.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Ron, when he has a green thumb that won't quit, and he had way too many cucumbers, and so he offered me his plethora of cucumbers. And refrigerator pickles were really good for the ones that were just too big to do spears
Yeah.
or babies or whatever you were doing. So you slice them up, and you put them in the liquid. And the liquid, technically, this is last year I learned that it doesn't really matter what the recipe is. Like you learn to make the liquid, pour it over the cucumbers, and everything will be okay. That is a lesson in life. Just pickle it. It's like put a bird on it from the Portlandia. But anyway, yeah. So, but refrigerator, I've never gotten into watermelon pickles. That I don't know if I've just had bad experiences or I wasn't raised on it, but the refrigerator pickle is like a new favorite thing. But I have a question for all y'all now that we're talking about pickles. Sorry, Sue, I just sort of we've diverged. But bread and butter pickles, okay, that's like the canned version of refrigerator pickles, but they're called bread and butter pickles.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Do they have anything to do with bread and butter and putting a pickle on it? Because have you done this? Take a piece of bread, put some butter on it, and put a bread and butter pickle on it, and it is
No.
the most amazing experience ever.
No, it's pickle sandwich, but it's got to be dill pickles. I'm a savory person, not a sweet. Don't sweeten up my vegetables. Keep your marshmallow and your brown sugar off of my squash and my sweet potatoes. And okay, all right, sorry. I'm looking up a recipe. My mother always had bread and butter pickles. I didn't like them because they were sweet. I like savory.
Did I show you what I'm currently eating with the mashed potato and the sweet pickle cucumber thing on top? So
see, we made the cucumber, the cream cucumber thing, but I know other like women in the church would sweeten it up, but my mother always did savory. There was a little bit of cream, a little bit of vinegar, onion, and sliced up pickles. Yeah.
And some dill.
Remember, yes, to answer your question, the bread and butter pickle is, classic. But I remember in our house, it was my dad would take the homemade bread, a good thick layer of butter, and then he would take radishes. He would wash them, cut off the tail, cut off the top, and whole radishes. And then he'd put the butter on both, and salt, and then the butter and the bread, and he would eat radish sandwiches.
Amazing.
Right out of the
garden. My mom
garden.
did that, but she sliced them.
Yeah, my dad's a big guy.
I didn't discover radish sandwiches and different things to do with radishes. I work at not now, but I worked at a historic farm here. And yeah, radish sandwiches, but also that radishes, you slice them up and you fry them. You cook radishes with onions, and even once radishes go to seed, the radish pods. I don't know any of that.
Mm-hmm.
The pod sounds interesting. Koreans have a big white radish that's like a daikon, except better because it's not as woody inside. It's really dense, and they cook it. And it's kind of like what you're describing. You cook it kind of savory, but you know how like an onion gets sweeter as you cook it? It gets sweeter, and it's so delicious with like anything, with fish, with beef.
Yep.
It's like this really wonderful, it almost acts like a potato. It's so good.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
That I
Yeah.
just learned that.
I'm gonna
get
ask
back
my
to Stu's question. Oh, sorry.
I'm going to ask my question again, just to kind of revisit
Got
this idea, but what's your relationship with food like in quarantine? Has it changed? Do you find yourself, I know sourdough was a really big thing at the beginning of quarantine. I'm not really sure why, but has your relationship changed at all, what you're choosing to cook?
I think I'm cooking things that take longer. Like during this, when there's not this corona thing going on and we're running to soccer and running to school, and like, I'm a teacher and the kids running around and me running around, my husband running around, I don't have time to bake bread. I certainly don't have time to roll out lefse. My mom has this really nice rib recipe that's like, it's like this whole process where you like boil all the fat off and then you like brown it and then you stick it in the sauce and it bakes in the oven on low for like ever. And it's like, we got some ribs on sale and my husband was like, I don't think I can grill these this week. It's too rainy, because it's been raining cats and dogs here all week. And I was like, I'll make my mom's thing. And he's like, well, that's kind of too much work. It's like, well, what else?
Where are we going?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And a kooky thing that's happened in our house was, so after the new year, my husband started his whole diet thing again, wanting control of that. And usually I'm the one who does the grocery shopping. I'm the one that does cooking. He's not a picky guy. I can do the pot of chili, like Heidi was saying, eat it every, 5 days a week, no biggie. And I love that. But always salad. We always would have salad. But we kind of divided and conquer. Again, we're in the Kansas City area. I have some clients that are in their 80s. I kind of am still conscientious of where I interact. He started doing the grocery shopping, which he didn't do before. And he likes convenient food, but he started reading labels. And he really is into now the riced cauliflower or the riced broccoli stuff and getting a lot more seafood. My husband is doing the cooking, and he's never done the cooking before. But I mean, not as
good
much.
Cooking?
No, it's yes, he's doing a great job. And I've learned to bite my tongue, back to kind of the family of origin thing. I know I was raised bare bones, and that idea of getting vegetables or salads that are like already something made in it, to me, well, that's just wasteful. You just get the stuff and you mix it up yourself. You're just, why pay an extra for that? But I've learned to bite my tongue, because he's done some of that, but then he is mixing and matching, and he's having a lot of fun with this cauliflower rice stuff. How can I jazz this up? I'm like, you go, honey, you go.
That stuff is really good.
Yeah, and it's a comfort. I just threw some chili this week. Some of that cauliflower rice stuff. Throw it in there. I throw everything in chili. Really, you can put anything in chili. So that's the biggest change here. And I'll admit, our one comfort thing is Aldi's. We have an Aldi's. We're addicted to Aldi's. Aldi's has these little German chocolate cookies that we remember from our anniversary trip in France and Germany, and we can find them there.
Mm-hmm.
And oh my gosh, they're just little chocolate covered little German delights, and they've been our comfort food.
Yeah, I've been cooking with my youngest, and he's excited because we have a chef who is moving in downstairs, a new restaurant, so they're not open right now. But one of the things that Jackson and I have been doing is that, okay, I got one of those Hello Fresh where they have the groceries shipped to you and you can follow their recipe. And I wasn't sure what I like it. However, it's ridiculously overpriced for what you're getting, except for you're learning that it really doesn't take you that long to make a good meal. I think there's a lesson built into that. I'm like, that only took us 35 minutes. Son of a gun. Who would have thought? Anyway, it's what I like about it though is that for him it actually was my way of getting him to read, because he doesn't want to read for school because everything's really boring. I even get tired just reading it. And so I was like, well, then read the recipe and blah blah blah. And so he's been cooking, and then when I told him, I broke the news and said, you know what, buddy, we're not going to be able to order HelloFresh every week that you're here. Like, this is expensive. So I explained to him how much it costs, and then versus how much it could cost if I just went to the co-op down the street and just bought it. And he's like, oh, right. And you have that app that just tells you everything you have, and we could just follow a recipe on that, right? And I go, right, yes, thank you. Anyway, so we did this thing where we wanted something sweet. So I have been trying like chia seeds. They're not just for your chia pet, I guess. And so I did the chia seeds with coconut milk and some flavoring. And I did this once for myself, and it was marvelous. I loved it. And then I did it with Jack, and we were letting it set, but he thought it was so easy that he wanted to do more. So when I wasn't looking, he made 2 more batches of chia seed pudding that's now in my fridge, and the kids are gone for the week. So I'm like, anybody want some chia seed pudding? Because I don't think I should be eating all this because it's a little overload. Anyway, so that's kind of a funny byproduct of getting your kids to help you cook. But you know what? I've seen my older kids make stuff on their own without my help, and I have to say it is so worth it to get the kids in the kitchen sooner, because someday they'll just make their own breakfast and you didn't have to do anything. It's amazing. So, but yeah, I made myself some curry tonight by myself and plan on just eating that throughout the week and all that jazz. So it's much healthier. I think I'm eating healthier.
I'm having sort of an opposite reaction where I normally bake all the time, like almost every day I bake. And when the quarantine started, at the same time the quarantine started, my husband basically changed careers, and he has a new job and he's working in a new space and everything. And I didn't realize how much food I was sending with him to take to work for his coworkers. And I made, like in the first week, I made a big batch of cookies, and I said, okay, here, take this to work. And he goes, no, they don't do that. And I go, well, maybe they just haven't had the chance to do it yet. He goes, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to, he wasn't ready for it. So I haven't been baking like at all, because when I do bake, I end up eating all the cookies, and I don't want to have all that baked food around. So I've been thinking about baking these really complicated things that'll take me all day to fill that need to bake, but then it'll be like one dish that I can share with the neighbors or something, so it's gone. But yeah, I've actually but I think for us it's been, we didn't eat out a lot before, but we're eating at home all the time now. And occasionally we'll do curbside or something, but you're just kind of getting used to just being at home and eating and having supper at the table every night. And it's nice. It's a little boring at times, but it's nice. So we actually, we've been on for almost an hour already. And since you guys all have ties to Minnesota in some way, I want to ask you one more question. And this is potentially for a project that I have coming up, but can you think of an object, a singular object that captures one aspect of your connection or identity with Minnesota? And if it helps, while you are thinking, I'll share what mine is, and then we'll take turns. And I want to make sure I get everybody on this one, but mine is a doily. I don't put doilies on display anywhere, but for me, it's the act of crocheting. Crocheting is a trade or a skill that's passed from mother to daughter in my family going back as I have no idea. I know for sure at least 5 generations. And as far as I know, I'm the last person in my family who crochets, although my nephew, Laura's son, he enjoys crocheting. So hopefully we can keep it alive with Johnny, who's peeking in the video right now. But for me, it's that act, the doily kind of symbolizes that, you know, you do it yourself. You know, I grew up in the country, and if you wanted something, it's almost like if you wanted something nice, you had to make it yourself. And people taking that simple thread and crocheting it into these incredibly intricate patterns to bring some fanciness into their home. You know, the lamp didn't sit on the table. The lamp sat on that beautiful doily on the table, and it added that little extra something. So there's a whole lot of metaphor wrapped up in a doily for me.
I think this is my object. This is my little farmall tractor.
Yes,
like,
you've got the right color. Yes. I'm sorry, I get excited about that. We fought on the bus about that. Yes.
Right. So my cousins have John Deere. I still love them. You know, and it was sort of a joke over at Christmas. You know, my first child had green tractors, sort of as a joke from the cousins, and so we bought them red tractors for their kids. And I can't remember where this came from, this little model, but like it sits in my china hutch because it looks like my grandfather's tractor. Like, it's not fancy, it doesn't have a cab, it's not air conditioned or anything like that. And I have fond memories of standing back here and hanging on and going out into the back 40 and so now, even now, you know, like when we see tractors on the road, we're like, tractor.
Is it International Harvester?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think mine would be a boat. That always makes me think of Minnesota because we lived on the lakes. So we just grew up on the lakes, and just boating is just Minnesota to me.
Any particular kind of boat? Like canoe, kayak,
I guess when I was a
fishing?
kid, when I was a kid, I guess it was a speedboat, but now it's a pontoon.
For me, it's a canoe. We lived in, when we lived in Hibbing, we got connected up with the Boundary Waters canoeing. And my husband took kids for 10 years in a row on Boundary Water canoe trips. And we took the kids when they were even little on canoe trips. And so that's been a long tradition of Minnesota, was the canoe. So.
I am, as you can see, I have a lot of crap. That's my thing. I kept and collect vintage clothing because I think the stories are in the clothing, but the stories are in objects. So this is a tough one, but I don't have it, but my sister has part of her butterhead from the Princess K of the Milky Way and Minnesota State Fair. And to me, that's it, because you see, I'm the youngest of 8. And that's like, my sister is freaking famous. No, I mean, she is. And because she was one of the final 12. And she sat in that booth. And it's back then, because she was in the 80s, it was like 75 pounds of butter. Now it's 90 pounds of butter. Your head is carved out of. And she didn't become Princess K of the Milky Way, but she still has the front half of her head, her butter head, in her freezer in a peach crate. She went on to, because it's us growing up on a dairy farm that shaped us. It's that involvement of state fair, county fair. And what I love is my sister went full circle because she then eventually worked for Midwest Dairy Association. She was in charge of, she redid that whole butter booth, that whole display that happened, like now it's probably been over, it's easily been over 10 years ago. But it's like, you know, she wasn't good enough to get Princess K, the Milky Way, but damn it, when she was a professional working, you know, professional, she redid that whole thing, you know. And she's good friends with the woman who did get it. There's so much, yeah, there's so much to that. And I trust me, I am on her coattails, and that explains my life. I'm the younger sister. Are you kidding? My sister's famous. My sister's still famous. You Google her name, she shows up. You Google my name, some dead nun in Illinois shows up. But that's, yeah.
Oh my
And that's
gosh,
the
I feel like I
epitome.
have to say something about that because, like, one of my dear friends from high school was, her head has been carved in butter, and her little
Yes.
sister also was. They didn't become Princess K of the Milky Way, but they had their heads carved in butter as the finalists,
Yep.
and they do, like, part of their head is in their freezer.
Yep.
Like, because I mean, you're not gonna eat your own head, but it's like such a, like, it's a thing. And my kids were even like, when I brought them to the fair, well, my youngest was a baby at the time, but the last time we were home during fair season, like, we went past the booth,
Yep.
and, you know, you can
You gotta
see
go
them
to the butter
carving the
booth.
girls.
Yep.
And my oldest was just like, what is this? I was like, it's Princess K of the Milky Way, obviously. Like, he's just like, this is a little weird. I was like, no, Rita and her little sister have been carved in butter, and their heads are still in their freezers. And he's just like, their heads are in their freezers.
Yeah. And when I lived in where I kind of knew Heidi. Heidi and I were like this. When she was in Little Falls, I lived in Piers, Minnesota, and oh my gosh, we had Princess K of the Milky Way in Piers, Minnesota. Incredible young woman. That's me as Sparky the Fire Pup. But you know, and it's gotten so sophisticated now. She had a frozen little mini booth she brought around, and you would chip off parts of her head and you'd have it on crackers. But yeah, her head I just cannot say enough about the Butterheads. No one else does this. And the same woman has been the carver. Well, okay, I'll stop now. Stop.
How about Megan? Do you have an object?
I was thinking probably a hockey stick, because Stillwater, where I'm from and was raised, is big into hockey. And well, where isn't in Minnesota, but particularly there's a lot of professionals come out of here, like Hibbing or something. But I wanted to also say, I didn't get a chance before, that one of the things that's really different for me in cooking, well, in food over the during the epidemic, is that I feel maybe it's time, but also just a little bit more confidence to experiment. So the New York Times, which I read every day, I always see these recipes, and I'm always like, yeah, maybe that sounds kind of good. They had a crepe, how to make this gorgeous crepe with a raspberry, I don't know, something reduction. And it was absolutely gorgeous. I never thought I would be able to do something like that. But so that experimentation was really fun. But sorry, so back to object. I think, yeah, definitely a hockey stick, because the ice hockey is really just a northern. I feel like now it's everywhere, and it's even in Ireland when we lived there in Belfast. But it really is, you know, the idea when I tell people it gets so cold here, you can drive on the lakes, you know, that kind of blows people's minds, you know. But I've lived all over, and so anyway, so I think hockey, hockey stick.
I think it's fun. We were talking about culture and how all of these elements are part of, you know, being Minnesotan or the Minnesota culture. And when Megan was talking, just to wrap it up, when Megan was talking about hockey now being in Ireland, let's consider that a cultural export. We're everywhere. But say, just I said at the beginning that we were going to do an audio recording only for the website. Are you guys okay if I share the video of the conversation on a different source or down the road or something? Yeah, thumbs up. Everyone's okay. Okay, I'm going to assume I don't see any major opposition, so I'm going to say we're good to go. Thank you, everybody, for coming. This is actually the last dish event for my project. It's I started it around 2016. I was supposed to have 14 events in total, and the last 3 were canceled. So this is the experimental sort of event that I'm doing to wrap it up. I got a grant in early 2020 to turn the project into a book from the Minnesota State Arts Board. And that's going to be a summer project for me. So this conversation will serve as that last chapter of the book. And if you have comfort food recipes that you want to put in that book, please send them to me. And maybe I'll make them in advance so I can include a picture or something. But I think it's a little bittersweet that the final aspect of this project is, you know, this thing we're doing in isolation when the whole goal and the whole purpose of the project was about connectivity and communication and, you know, getting to know the people who live in your neighborhood. So I'm thrilled that you guys were all able to come out and share your stories and share your food. And yeah, I hope I can include them in the book and wrap this project up nicely.
Look at Terry's object, and Terry, she wants to put us on some website now with the video.
What was that?
I said you gotta see Terry's object. She's got a loon.
Yeah, the loon. So thank you, everybody, for coming. I hope you have a nice time. Have a good Thursday night. Have a good Memorial weekend. And we'll be in touch.
Say hi to Chris, Sue.
Thank you.
Yep, balloon.
I will. Bye.
Thanks for everything.